Very clear, Richard.
This call is now being.
Voice is not clear.
Ritu?
Ma'am, now it's clear?
Yeah.
It is better. It is better.
A very good morning and warm welcome to respected principal, teachers, our honorable panelists, and dear students. Before starting the event, we would like to share with you that
Ritu, I suggest you try switching off your video. Maybe it could be bandwidth issue, and it might help if you switch off your video while you are speaking. Let's try that. Hopefully, we will be able to hear you clearer.
Okay. So now it's clear?
Seems better.
Okay, sir. A very good morning and a warm welcome to respected principal, teachers, our honorable panelists, and dear students. Before starting the event, we would like to share with you that IQAC team of our college has started an initiative with an objective to spread and inculcate awareness on relevant and contemporary environmental issues among all. The message of the month is Safe Water, Safe Life. Let us take the pledge to save water for the good of the humanity. I, Prichidata, an executive member of Kirt, the Economic Society, will be the host of today's panel discussion, which will allow us to underscore the increasing sectorial growth in India and the depth insights on policy changes that could revive India's growth trend. I request all the participants to keep their cameras off and their mics muted throughout the event. Feedback from attendance form will be shared at the end of the event. Please make sure you fill that form as it's mandatory for the certificate. Question can be put in the chat box and will be taken at the end of the event. Now, I request our respected principal, Professor Gurmohinder Singh, to come on board and say a few words. Now, I request Professor Gurmohinder Singh to come on board and say a few words.
I don't
Thank
think.
you.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome the dignitaries of today's panel discussion, Professor Ram Singh ji from Delhi School of Economics, Professor Shakti Kumar ji from Jawaharlal University, and Dr. S P Sharma from PhD Chamber of Commerce, to this online panel discussion, which has been organized by the Department of Economics, Sri Guru Nanak Dev Khalsa College. In the given circumstances, it is very inquisitive question that why is the Indian economy slowing down? What are the reasons and the future ahead? So this discussion, I think, will enlighten us on that subject. We all are eagerly waiting to listen to our panelists who will give food for thought for our budding economist. So I welcome you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Now, Dr. Meena Singh, the convener of the Economics Department, will give a welcome address.
Thank you, Ritu. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
A very warm welcome to our panel of experts today for the discussion. Welcome, Professor Ram Singh. Welcome, Professor Shakti Kumar, and welcome, Dr. S P Sharma. I thank you for sparing your valuable time for the discussion today. I would also like to welcome the faculty members who have joined us from different colleges. I can see a lot in the list. Thank you so much. Thank you to the online mode, which has encouraged all of you to join and be with us for this discussion today. I would also like to tell you that the online mode has not deterred our students to keep organizing events, whether it is case study competition, debates, online fests. They have been continuously working hard to put up the show. Thank you so much, dear students. Thank you all for joining us. Now, coming to the topic for today's panel discussion. A decade ago, India was a rising star in the global economy, with its annual growth rate touching 8 to 9% between 2003 and 2008. With price stability and modest fiscal and balance of payment deficits. It was hailed as one of the fastest growing large economies, nipping at China's heels and reckoned as the emerging global back office as against China being the world's factory. That boom is associated with a sharp upturn in the investment rate, peaking at 38% of GDP in 2007-8, with rising domestic saving financing most of this investment. Unprecedented foreign capital inflows in the form of FDI, FPI, ECBs at close to 10% of GDP supplemented the domestic resources. A rising share of short-term financial inflows caused concerns about financial fragility. The global financial crisis in 2008 upended the boom, though it affected India only modestly for two reasons: its stricter financial regulations and relatively large and closed domestic markets. After a brief dip in 2008-9, India, thanks to accommodative monetary and looser fiscal policies, witnessed a V-shaped recovery which lasted till 2011-12. The lower output growth has translated into job losses, withdrawal of workers from labor force, a sharp rise in the open unemployment rate, and a stagnation in the real wages in rural India. By the middle of the 2010s, the euphoria about reforms got muted, with economic growth distinctly lower than in the previous decade. Domestic saving, investment, and capital inflows likewise trended downwards. IT exports were tapering off as the US imposed taxes on outsourcing and because of the technological changes. Inflation, however, ruled high on account of international oil prices, and the balance of payments deficit became precarious for a while. Decelerating output growth affected the earnings of corporates and hence their ability to service the enormous debt they had accumulated during the boom. Corporate bad debts got translated into the banking sector's non-performing assets as firms could not repay loans, restricting banks' ability to offer new loans. Government nurtured nationalist projects such as Make in India to raise the manufacturing sector's share in GDP to 25% by 2022 and create 100 million additional manufacturing sector jobs. And populist targeted welfare programs were promoted, such as the provision of free cooking gas connections to women of below poverty line families and no collateral small bank loans for poor and unemployed. To eradicate black money and also to encourage greater use of digital transactions in November 16, the government demonetized the large value currency notes of rupees 1000 and rupees 500, accounting for 86% of the total value of the currency in circulation. It was indeed a macroeconomic shock, devastating the informal, unorganized sector, employing up to 90% of the workforce and contributing nearly half of the domestic output. Then came the GST to replace various indirect taxes. However, its introduction in 2017 was the second shock in less than a year, welcomed in principle but widely criticized for its poor design and implementation. Besides adversely affecting small and informal enterprises, thus leading to a severe shortfall in tax collection. It has affected government finances and the sharing of revenue between the center and the states. In addition to this, in March 2019, we had a nationwide lockdown due to the corona pandemic, which worsened the economic situation further. With this overview of the Indian economy's growth story, I think we are ready to listen to the expert panel to the dynamics of India's slowdown. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you, Principal Sir, for joining us. And over to the experts now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would like to introduce the honorable speaker for today's panel discussion. Our first panelist is Dr. S.P. Sharma, who is the Chief Economist at the leading industry body, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. S.P. Sharma has around 24 years of diverse experience in the various areas of economy, trade, and industry. He has conducted more than 100 research studies, papers, projects, etc. with the prestigious organization. He frequently appeared in the panel discussion roundtable conducted by various TV channels. Moreover, Mr. Sharma is the member of the RBI Industry Monitoring Group, editorial board of General Press of India, and much more. Our second panelist is Professor Shakti Kumar, who is currently the head of the Center for the Economic Studies and Planning, SSS Jawaharlal Nehru University. His area of specializations are public finance, mathematical economics. He has studied 15 years of PG teaching experience. He has done a lot of publication in both national and international journals and books. Some of his famous publications include an assessment of deregulation of saving account deposit rates in India, financial inclusion and the size of farms in Uttar Pradesh, India, estimator of population variance using coefficient of Kurtis and the population means of auxiliary variable, and many more. He has also peer-reviewed general books like Credit and Productivity, Agricultural Trade, Liberalization in South Asia and Bana, Germany, and Trade Liberalization and its impact on the economy. We also have Professor Ram Singh with us, who is the professor at Delhi School of Economics, Delhi University. His area of interest are law and economics, public economics, contact theory, and microeconomics. He is a recipient of a lot of awards and honors: Commonwealth Fellowship in Economics, Postdoctoral Fellowship, Economics, Harvard University, and Ronald Coase Fellowship in Institutional Economics are the few of them. He has also appeared as a subject expert before the Joint Committee of Parliament of India on the Land Acquisition Bill. Apart from being a member of a lot of reputed government and private bodies, he also has a lot of publication to his credit from the varied field of economics. We are all so honored to have you all on one platform today. Now, I would like to call our first speaker, Dr. S.P. Sharma, to share his thought with us. Now, I would like to call our first speaker, Dr. S.P. Sharma, to share his thought with us.
Thank you, Madam Richu. Thank you very much. Respected Professor Guru Mohinder Singh Ji, Principal, Shri Guru Nanak Dev Khalsa College, Dr. Meena Singh Ji, Professor Shakti Kumar Ji, Professor Ram Singh, Dr. Ishmita Singh, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Shri Guru Nanak Dev Khalsa College for organizing this very meaningful event on the dynamics of slowdown of the Indian economy, which is very relevant at this juncture because now we have to move forward with a double-digit growth trajectory in the next financial year. And the economy is now consolidating, markets are consolidating, and we have recovered a lot from the slowdown of March and April. There was a severe slowdown, drastic slowdown in the main lead economic indicators. IIP was decelerated by 57% in the month of April. So that is a drastic fall in the IIP, in the history of IIP. And then core infrastructure also decelerated by around 40%. Exports were down by 60%. Then overall economic growth was impacted by at around 24% in the quarter one. And GST collections were at around 32,000 crore. That was a severe fall in the revenue part of the government. But with the plethora of reforms by the government, started from month of May, and then reforms in the segment of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and various reforms for each and every segment of the economy, we were able to recover sooner than expected. The total lockdown had an adverse impact on the almost all these sectors of the Indian economy. And the worst contraction was 23.9% at around 4% in the April-June quarter. And the severe impact was on the sectors which were considered for the job creation. Like the construction witnessed a 50% contraction, then trade, hotels, and other services witnessed a 47% shrinking, then manufacturing 39% contraction, and mining 23% deceleration. The only sector which posted the positive growth trajectory was the agriculture sector, which reflected a 3% growth in the almost all the quarters during the last uh, 3 quarters of the current financial year. And government, since the lockdown, came out with several proactive measures to mitigate the pandemic impact of coronavirus and announced a package of around 30 lakhs crore. Exactly, it was 29.87 lakh crore to mitigate the impact. The stimulus was in various forms, like various credit guarantee schemes and various facilitation measures by the Reserve Bank of India in terms of increased credit and various fiscal measures to create demand in the economy. And this package was for both demand and supply side measures to make supplies more efficient and to create demand in the economy, along with various administrative changes in several key sectors like agriculture, defense manufacturing, space research, by opening up these sectors and to attract more and more investments in the promising sectors of the economy. And government also announced the extension of 100% credit guarantee scheme to the 27 stressed sectors. That was a significant move by the government, that credit guarantees given to the large number of sectors. And beside the fiscal stimulus, the government also announced tax rebates for the growth critical sectors such as housing, which is also a demand creator and employment creator in the economy, because it also creates the spillovers to uh, create demand-led growth. So government was announcing various reforms week after week, day after day, to mitigate the daunting impact of the coronavirus and to rejuvenate the economy from the lows of March and April. And major facilitation was to the MSME sector also, micro, small, and medium enterprises, because liquidity was a major concern. That was also even before the pandemic coronavirus. And coronavirus lockdown just aggravated the situation. And the sector was in the severe crisis of the working capital, because they were not able to sell their products, which were already in their inventories. And working capital was totally blocked, and they were not able to do business. So government provided a great facilitation to the MSME sector, and there was a 3 lakh crore emergency credit line for the industry to uh, facilitate them, to support them to come out from the pandemic impact of the coronavirus. And Reserve Bank of India also took proactive steps like sharp reduction in the key interest rates to boost the liquidity during the difficult time. And other than offering a loan moratorium for a period of 6 months, the government also announced a one-time loan restructuring scheme that was also very important, and everybody appreciated in the business community, That was to ensure easier repayment terms on outstanding loans. That was need of the hour, and uh, industry considered it very positively, and it created a confidence level in the businesses, because stimulus is always not in the financial terms. Stimulus is also in terms of the policy environment. A good policy environment is also a good stimulus. And third stimulus, if first is the financial, then second is the good policy environment, adequate policy environment, calibrated policy environment. Then the stimulus of confidence. So if government is providing financial stimulus and the policy stimulus, but the confidence is not there, so that stimulus will not become fruitful. And if only confidence is built and financial support is not there, then the economy will also not do well, and that will also not become fruitful. So businesses, economy need three types of stimuluses. Like first is the stimulus of financials, second is the policy. Policy should also be conducive, supportive, facilitative, and third, the confidence. So government provided the three stimuluses during the uh, pandemic coronavirus period, through the financial channels, through policy. Structural reforms were there, historic structural reforms were there, and the confidence level with the uh, support of various industry bodies and various business organizations, intellectual organizations, to build up more and more confidence among the businesses. And in the policy front, government also temporarily suspended the insolvency and bankruptcy code for the duration of pandemic, making all defaults of the COVID period outside the preview. That was also a significant development, that because uh, you have to become very, very calibrated during the difficult times. So government considered this very important for the businesses, that this code should not be implemented for the uh, difficult time. And in a bid to boost India's manufacturing capabilities, to enhance exports, government announced the production-linked incentive PLI scheme of rupees 1.97 lakh crore. That was also very significant, which is for the three key sectors, and it will provide the uh, long-term benefits to the economy and connect the Indian economy with the global markets. It will make Indian economy more and more competitive, not only in the domestic market, but also in the international market. And the positive impact on the economy was reflected from the quarter two, when we saw a minus 7.5% contraction in the quarter two, and recovered significantly from the 24% contraction in the uh, quarter one. And this 7.5% contraction was uh, very much good as compared with the average of minus 12.4% in the uh, other world economic system. So reforms were becoming more and more fruitful, and we observed a positive growth in the quarter three, which is 0.4% uh, for the quarter ending December. So the effect of the reforms is now very much visible. We have observed a V-shaped recovery, and I believe this recovery will sustain on the back of various reform measures undertaken by the government during the last 1 year, starting from March, April 2020. And we will post a double-digit growth in the next financial year, because this is not the projection of the our government, but projection from the other international organizations also, like IMF, OECD, all are projecting a great growth trajectory for the Indian economy in the next financial year. And we will be the fastest moving economy in the world economic system. And we will regain our lost momentum and become more and more visible in the global charts. Here, I would like to mention a few suggestions for the more and more strong trajectory of the Indian economy in the coming times, because we receive a lot of representations from the industry, their practical problems, and their various vital suggestions, which are very, very practical to move forward. And these suggestions are coming from the uh, mouth of horses. Like, first is the connectivity of the reforms of the central government and the state governments. There must be a great synchronization of the policy environment between central government and the state government to become more and more dynamic and practical and strong to compete with the world economies in the world economic system, and also in the domestic market, because we have to compete in the domestic market also. We are open to many economies. We have signed so many free trade agreements with the so many economies. And second is the synchronization of ease of doing business and the reduced cost of doing business. We have reduced, we have improved a lot in the ease of doing business from 142 in 2014 to 63 in 2020. But the ease of doing business is not that much strong at the ground level. There must be more and more focus for the MSMEs ease of doing business. And ease of doing business must be supported by the reduced cost of doing business. If the ease of doing business is improving and the cost of doing business is significantly high, then the ease of doing business will not become fruitful. And there are 5 costs which are impacting the growth of the businesses, their expansion thoughts, their production possibilities. These costs are: first is the cost of capital, second is the cost of power, third is the cost of compliances, and fourth is the cost of land, and fifth is the cost of labor and the labor compliances, labor laws. So, and the cost of logistics. So if these costs are addressed and cost factor is also considered seriously, then we have a lot of potential to boost a double-digit growth, not only for the next financial year, but for the many years, because we have a lot of potential. And particularly the MSME sector. I was discussing the recovery process in the Sitkul area of Haridwar recently. Then they were saying that they have potential to grow 50% every year, because they have all capabilities and they know how to grow. But they are not facilitated by the ease of doing business at the ground level. They face a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. Cost of capital is high. They are not able to get adequate finances at adequate time. So, on the basis of various inputs, I would suggest that there must be a great synchronization of the ease of doing business and the cost of doing business. And third suggestion is that Reserve Bank of India is doing a lot. They reduced repo rate significantly, but there is no synchronization of the policies and facilitation provided by Reserve Bank of India and the banking sector. They are not percolating the full effect of the RBI policies at the ground level. So there must be percolation of the reduction in policy rates, repo rate at the ground level for the benefit of consumers, households, and the businesses. So these are the vital reforms which can facilitate and strengthen the growth trajectory of the Indian economy and have potential to make it more and more strong to compete and to face any challenge from the global markets or the global shocks. And the great initiative like the Atmanirbhar Bharat or Self-Reliant India or the Make in India programs have significantly encouraged a lot of local manufacturers to grow locally and at the same time be competitive to make a mark globally by elevating their standards. And recently in the union budget, the finance minister constituted so many reforms and continued with its objective of announcing an initiative to boost demand in these sectors that would have a trickle-down effect on the others. And there are efforts to reduce the cost of logistics and make the manufacturing sector more and more competitive. The government has increased its focus on infrastructure, and there is a lot of focus on the capital investments. The government has earmarked a sum of rupees 5.5 lakh crore as capital expenditure on infrastructure development. This was a hike of around 34% over the last year's budgetary allocation of around 4 lakh crores. The government in the past had identified both social and economic infrastructure projects that need to be completed over a period of next 5 years and have earmarked a sum of more than 100 lakh crores. So all these measures, all these announcements are going to provide a multiplier effect to the economy and to boost its growth trajectory significantly in the coming times. But still, lot of reforms are needed in the various segments of the economy, and synchronization of reforms must be at the top of the agenda to percolate them at the ground level and to make them more and more fruitful for the benefit of consumers and the businesses. Thank you very much for inviting me to present my viewpoint, and I would like to have interaction with students if they have any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us. Now, I would like to invite Professor Shakti Kumar to enlighten us with his thoughts.
I think sorry to interrupt. I think there are 2-3 students who have doubts, so we can request Harpreet to first answer question, then we will have sir, if that's okay. Because
Okay, it is fine.
Thank you, sir. Shakti, sir. Thank you.
Now, I request Harpreet to ask the questions.
Harpreet, I think there are 2-3 questions. You can pose them to sir.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Good morning, sir. The first question that comes is, what is your opinion on privatization? Do you think government is privatizing PSUs very fast?
Yes, we believe that this process is very good for the economy because this is to create more and more business in the economy, because privatization always brings dynamism in the economic system. So with the privatization, we believe that more and more jobs will be created and fruitful results will come from the enterprises.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Pankaj Pandey. He asks that since the economy is in a bad condition now, is it better time to privatize PSU and disinvest them to raise funds and to make fiscal figures looking good? Is there any better option to manage PSUs? What will be its long-term effect on the Indian economy in the context of government and the public?
So long-term effect will be very good for the Indian economy because uh, this is the difficult time, and this is the most opportune time also because we have recovered a lot from the difficulty, from the lows of the March, April last year. We have recovered a lot, and we have shown our strengths, which are visible from the growth numbers. We have posted a positive growth also. And in the difficult times, you need money, and uh, government has now the right choice to generate money for the welfare of the economy and to facilitate the businesses and to create more and more business in the economy to provide great employment opportunities for the growing young population in the country.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Naresh Malik. He asks, given the political scenario, can synchronization is a possibility?
Yes, possibilities are always there. We have to do efforts to make possibilities more and more fruitful. So I believe that will be in the benefit of the states also. If the synchronization of the central government policies and the state government policies is created at a great extent, I think that will be beneficial for the states to address their various issues and challenges.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Soumya Shukla, who asks, what is your opinion on privatization of health, education, and social security sectors?
Yes, as I said earlier, that privatization is good to create efficiency. But I also believe in the meaningful privatization and uh, effective privatization. So the quality should also come with the privatization of such institutions, and there should not be any compromise with the quality of the uh, products produced by the institutions.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ashish Maurya, who asks, in the whole pandemic, all the central banks have responded very well. Do we think that the rise in the economy is due to the responsiveness itself? And is it the first time that all the central banks, whether US, FED, ECB, and RBI, are very fast?
Yes, because this is the most difficult time during the last 100 years. So central banks have to play a great role to lead the economies because they are the actual policy providers and to balance the economy during the difficult times. So their role becomes more and more important at this juncture, and they are doing a lot. And we appreciate that central banks across the countries have facilitated their respective economies to come out from the pandemic impact of COVID-19.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank you.
answering all the queries so beautifully. Now I hand over the mic to Richu.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Professor Shakti Kumar to enlighten us with his thoughts.
Good morning, ma'am. Thanks for inviting me on this occasion. Respected principals, Dr. Guru Mohan Singh ji, Dr. S.P. Singh ji, Professor Ram Singh ji, my colleagues and students. As Professor S.P. Singh has already focused on the topic, I would also like to share on the same topic. and it will be shared through the screen. So खुशी यहाँ ना बेटा यस हम स्क्रीन शेयर करना चाह रहे हैं देखो पहले स्टॉप शेयरिंग करें हेलो स्क्रीन कहाँ शेयर हो रहा है बेटा कहाँ हो रहा है देखो मुझे दिख रहा है हेलो हाँ तो हम तो पढ़ेंगे ना पढ़ना चाहिए ना तो खोलिए नहीं दिख रहा है
Sir, please click on your press. Yes, sir, it is visible now.
It is visible. Thank you. Thank
Yes, sir.
Sir, just maximize it.
you. Yeah. So as the title shows, the dynamics of India's slowdown is self-inflicted process. So let us say some focus on the economic slowdown. So growth rate of the GDP in the 2015 was 8% and 2016 it increased to 8.26%. Over the period it started declining. So as the slowdown is defined as the two consecutive quarterly growth of GDP will be declining, but it will be still positive. So it is declining over the period of the two quarters. So economic slowdown is like this, and it became negative also, and after that we have recovered it. So my emphasis will be on the slowdown as the topic shows self-inflicted. So, but I will show in the terms of three dynamics that will be deliberated, self-inflicted, structural, or the cyclical form. If you will say that the slowdown of the Indian economy was deliberated, then what steps were taken by the government of India? In 2014, a Vijay Nayak committee was formed, and that reported that the NPA has become a grave, and it will create a problem for the Indian economy. And government on that point have tinkered and did not take good steps. And in 2015, Indian economy was suffered from the floods and the droughts. And that time it affected the agricultural sector and hits inflation also. And in 2016, government took a step of demonetization, and through demonetization, there was a cash problem in the economy. And in the 2016, it's a for manufacturing sector, IBC, insolvency and bankruptcy code was started. And after that, GST was implemented in 2017. And in 2018, government announced that there will be BS, Bharat Stage 6 cars. And it has created a less demand in the economy of the old car. And in 2019, Article 370 was scrapped. So scrapping of Article 317, there was indirect effect on the agricultural sector, especially for the production of the apple. And to 2020, it was the Farm Bill, which we are looking at. So one aspect is that the economic slowdown was not self-inflicted, but it was deliberated, as the government of India has taken various steps which affected economy directly or indirectly in the negative way, either through the creating problem of the cash crunch, or increasing the inflation, or not taking care of the Vijayanagara committee, or not handling in proper way floods and the drought. Anyhow, the second view can be shown that the slowdown of the Indian economy was self-inflicted. Let us see whether the slowdown of the Indian economy was self-inflicted through the various points. First, the agricultural productivity has ceilings. As we know that agricultural sector provides employment to almost 45% of the cost and feeding economy. And it has contribution in the export sector also. But it has the limit of the productivity. So agricultural production cannot be increased more than that of the ceilings. So there are the massive surplus agricultural labor in the economy, and India is unable to support them through redistribution of income. In the world economy, a number of the countries are there who are supporting them financially through a redistribution system only because that was the small in the number, that is a small in the number. But in the case of the India, it is very high. So it may create problem. Perhaps this is the reason that India is unable to support them or all farmers through redistribution of the income. Third point is the no alternative was for the manufacturing. So there are three economic sector: agriculture, industry, and the services sector. So, but the manufacturing sector is also have good share in the GDP and the employment, but we don't have alternative of it. So we are looking for the manufacturing sector for creating employment and creating capital in the economy. The study of the HBC has already shown that it is the domestic bottleneck which is creating 51% problem in ease of the doing business. So I think India is not dealing properly with ease of doing business due to the domestic problems like of the infrastructure, roads, power, and so on. A number of the economies in the world have moved towards export orientation. But in the case of the India, it is the consumption-based economy. We know that the share of the private household in the GDP is almost 60%, and the government expenditure never exceeded more than 11% in the GDP. So we can say that India is the consumption-based economy. And the next point is India has not moved towards export-oriented economy. So we can say that the export minus imports is not, I think net export is not contributing positive way to the GDP. And next point is the crawling but floating currency. India has adopted floating currency, that is changing all with respect to the dollar, and China has adopted a crawling. It means there is small changes with respect to the dollar. And labor force participation rate, that is almost 50% in India. It clearly shows that 50% of the labor force is still either not working or not looking for the job, because labor force participation rate is almost 50% of India, while the Vietnam it has 74%, Bangladesh at 56%, and India states at the 7th rank from the below in the case of the labor force participation rate. So I think all these factors are responsible for showing that Indian economy has suffered from the slowdown, and that was because of the self-inflicted. Now, one can say that the slowdown of the Indian economy was a cyclical step. It was a short-term period. So, GDP of India is decreasing over the period since 2016. And the growth rate is decreasing, but more than zero, that is the slowdown. So I think it is a short-term period if the cyclical step is accepted, and it happens because economy is not working at the potential level because of the several domestic bottlenecks. And finance to the economy became helpless. Who are the financiers of the economy? I think the public sector banks and the government. The finance to the economy became helpless due to high NPA from both sides of demand and supply. From the demand side, companies demanded high amount of the credit, and the supply side, they supplied high amount of the credit and financially turned over to the NPA. So it could be the cyclical step. Is this slowdown a structural step? If it is a structural that is responsible for slowdown of the Indian economy, then we can say that it is a long-term phenomena that is responsible for slowdown that Indian economy did not see earlier, and India woke up later on. It started taking various steps as Professor S.P. Singh has already emphasized what steps the government has taken up. So seed of the slowdown was started a quite long period, and it became visible today. Especially during the Corona period, we saw that the slowdown has started creating problem, and ultimately Indian economy got suffered from the recession, and today it is recovering. So Indian economy was focusing on the on the import substitution policy. I think that was the policy matter. And still today, India is imposing high tariff. India average tariff rate is 17%, while in USA it is just 3%. I think Indian government during the period of the pay there was a disinvestment ministry. So this starting of the disinvestment process just for earning more and more revenue that was started quite earlier. So I can say that the slowdown of the Indian economy only was due to the structural step. And even today there is a mismatch of the educational degree and the skills. So number of the graduate youths are unemployed in Indian economy because the skills demanded by the manufacturing sector and even the services sector does not match with their educational sector. And the last point that shows the structural step is y is equal to c plus I plus g plus x minus m. And c itself shares almost 60% of the GDP, and I 30%, and g shares just around 10 to 11%. Sometimes it is 8 to 9%. Even during the Corona period, government gave the stimulus package, as Professor Dr. S.P. Singh has said. So, and that stimulus package was 20 lakh crore, and that was almost 10% of the GDP. And X minus M is negative in the case of the India. So I think a structural steps taken in since a longer period in India is the responsible for slowdown of the Indian economy. Slow down, we can see the sectoral linkages, agriculture, industry, and the services sector. We can see that the sectoral composition of in the Indian GDP, 59% today is being shared by the services sector, 27% by the manufacturing sector, and just 40% of the agricultural sector. So all these agriculture, industry, and the services sector are linked with the slowdown. Sectoral linkages can be seen. So the employment, what does it is happening? In the case of the agricultural sector, let's see the employment is decreasing over the period, decrease from almost 60% in 2000 to 44.2% in 2020, while the share of the services sector has increased massively from 28.2% in 2000 to 4.2%. But in the case of the industry that is being given the massive stimulus packages, as Dr. S.P. Singh has shown in providing the employment is almost constant since last 10 years. So earlier it was 11.9% and it is 12.6%. So in the sense of the employment providing scenario, industrial or the manufacturing sector is almost constant. So I can say that the slowdown is a mixed process. It could be deliberated, self-inflicted, or structural or the cyclical. So consequences of the slowdown, as S.P. Singh has already shown, that unemployment rate is increasing. It increased to 78.8% in 2020 from the 4% in 2016, and due to slowdown or the recession, household saving has decreased from 60.9% in 2020 to 2014. And household debt has increased to 11% from 9% in 2014. So slowdown pushed the economy into the recession, as we are seeing just. So what steps have been taken by the government of India to curb the slowdown? The stimulus package that was a 20 lakh crores, and crop insurances, reduction in corporate taxes, labor laws, land reforms, infrastructure funding, MSME improvement, and restructuring of the banking sectors. So all these steps have been taken to curb down the slowdown. So suggestion is that that we should remove the barriers to ease of doing business. I think this point was also supported by Dr. S.P. Singh in the early presentation. And the second suggestion is we should win the confidence of the small market players, and we should create job. So that for that, capital creation is very important for the job creation, and we should develop infrastructure, strengthen economic financiers like banks, and increase capital expenditure, as the trend of the economy shows that it is the revenue expenditure which is much higher. Almost 85% of the total expenditure is the revenue expenditure, and around 15% is the capital expenditure. So I would like to suggest that capital expenditure should be increased over the period. So in the concluding point, and GDP growth rate was high and rising till 2016. So, and it was responsible for responsibility for us to maintain the sustainable growth, but the slowdown started after that. So it was neither self-inflicted nor deliberated, but mix of structure, self-inflicted, deliberated, and cyclical regions, and Corona pushed this slowdown into the recession. So responsiveness of the government helped the Indian economy moving towards recovery that we have already seen. Thank you, ma'am. So I am stopping here.
Thank you so much, sir. I request Harpreet to take up the question from the attendees.
Good morning, sir.
Good
Ishmita
morning.
Singh asks, do you think that the missing manufacturing sector is one of the main reasons for the slowdown, as India has jumped from the agriculture sector to the service sector?
Hello.
I think Harpreet, you can repeat. You were not clear, child.
I
All
think
right,
it is
ma'am,
not
I'll just
clear.
repeat. Ishmita Singh asks, do you think that missing manufacturing sector is one of the main reasons for the slowdown, as India has jumped from the agriculture sector to the service sector?
Hello.
Sir, am I still not audible?
Hello. Please repeat again.
Ishmita, you can ask directly.
Okay, sir. One of the first questions I was asking, sir, is that do you think that the missing manufacturing sector is one of the main reasons for the slowdown, as India has jumped from the agriculture sector to the service sector?
I can't see it because it's the mix of all. So slowdown, yeah. India got suffered from the slowdown not only because of the manufacturing sector, but it was the mix of all three sectors.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ria Agarwal asks, according to you, what are the reasons for the leapfrogging growth of India from agriculture to service, manufacturing sector being more or less stagnant in terms of contribution to GDP and employment generation?
The share and both and employment scenario shows that the agricultural sector is decreasing, but the services sector has improved in this sector, and the manufacturing sector is almost constant, as you said. I think it is good, and it is happening in India.
Thank you, sir. The next query is from Ashish Maurya, who asks, how will the development of financial institutions will help the financial institutions post-COVID? Already a lot of money has been pumped in. The question arises that do we actually need DFI as of now, or could we postpone it for further support? Also, it will lead to maintain the current inflation for the real estate sector, which could be a platform for the consumer inside.
I think both the monetary and the fiscal policies should take good steps in the favor of all these sectors to improve the situation.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sarika Khurana asks, sir, do you think the NEP can take care of the mismatch between education, degree, and skills? Should there be more emphasis on vocational training?
Yeah, I think so. We should focus more on the skill development. So education should be related to the skill development. So as per the demand of the industry and the services sector.
Thank you, sir. The next query is from Pankaj Pandey. Do you think that there will be robust growth trajectory in Indian economy after financial year 2021? Without looking back, India has taken many steps to boost skill development, but all mission has not done well. What is the reason behind it?
I think government has a limitation to spend or share in the GDP. So it has never increased more than 11%. And most of the cases in India, it was limited to the 9 to 10%. So I can't hope that in the 2021 and 22, the India could have the robust growth. It could be, I think, just marginal improvement due to the Corona period.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving such insights into the topic. Now I request Richu to take over the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us. Lastly, I would like to invite Professor Ram Singh to speak on the topic.
Thank you. Thank you. I have put together some slides, and let me see if I can share them. Can you please confirm if you see the slides?
Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Okay. I will also check if you see slides going back and forth.
Yes, sir, they are doing.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to start by thanking the college, Honorable Principal Dr. Singh, my colleagues from the department and from other colleges, my co-panelist, Professor Shakti Kumar, Dr. S.P. Sharma, and dear students. I'm happy to be with you today morning in pre-noon session to share my thoughts on the state of Indian economy. And I will take up my discussion where Professor Shakti Kumar has finished his talk, his comments. So Professor Shakti Kumar gave very comprehensive account of sectoral composition of Indian economy and its overview for last several decades. Prior to that, Dr. Sharma gave a comprehensive account of government's announcements, policy announcements to promote growth, to promote employment. So in this background, equipped with the details of policy announcements and equipped with the comprehensive account of Indian economy in the sense of its structural composition, in the sense what has happened during last several decades in terms of share of different sectors in the economy, their share in the GDP, their share in employment. So in this backdrop, I want to ask two questions. First question is that has the government done enough to mitigate the crisis that we have been hit with? So COVID came as a shock. It came as a one in a century kind of crisis. And the finance minister, before presenting the budget, February 28th, promised once in a century kind of a budget. So therefore, the question we want to ask is, has the government or budget, have they done enough to mitigate the adverse consequences of COVID? The second question I want to frame from a perspective, and the perspective is that every crisis is also an opportunity. Therefore, I want to ask and address the question, has the government done enough to make good use of COVID as a crisis? I will start by addressing the first issue, then I will come to the first question, my response to first question. And so, and my discussion will overlap with what Professor Shakti said prior to this and what Dr. Sharma stated in terms of his views and presentations. So to put briefly, I'm going to argue that government has made good use of COVID as a crisis, but still a lot remains to be done in mitigating adverse consequences of this crisis and also putting the economy back to growth path where economy can grow at the rate of 7%, 7 to 9%, and double-digit growth is even more ambitious. So let me tell you why I feel the budget has made good use of the crisis. If you have followed the media debates on budget in the past, you would have you would have come across articles, commentaries saying that government budget numbers do not reflect true fiscal deficit. And that used to be true. So government will, central government will, Union Government of India will claim some fiscal deficit in budget estimates, in revised estimates, in in all its projections and announcements. And those numbers will be generally between 3 to 4%. But that was not a true picture of fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit has been upward of 5 to 6, 7% actually for last fiscal year. I am not talking about present fiscal year, but the past fiscal year. The fiscal deficit is stated to be around 7% of GDP compared to less than 4% admitted by the center. What was happening on this front? The reason why there was a mismatch between true fiscal figures and government announced figures was that the government used to borrow through its departments or through its enterprises. For example, Food Corporation of India has been borrowing. National Highways Authority of India, that's an enterprise of Central Government of India, has been borrowing massive amounts in lakhs of crores. And that is true for FCI and several other enterprises, public sector undertakings. But those borrowings and those expenses were not shown in budget numbers. They were kept off the budget balance sheet, so to speak. And thereby, there was underreporting of fiscal deficit. Why is that a problem? That was problem on two counts. One is that it's important for all stakeholders, for government, for investors, for consumers, for foreign investors. It's important for them to have true picture, transparent picture of the state of economy, of which fiscal position is very important component. The second reason was that in order to hide some of these borrowings from the market, government used to use other government entities for the purpose of borrowing and lending. For example, Food Corporation of India has been borrowing from National Small Savings Funds at the rate of more than 8%. So Food Corporation of India has been paying more than 8.5% for its borrowings. But if Government of India wants to borrow, it can always borrow from the market around 6%. So it's the cheapest borrower in the market. That means that it meant that the actual cost of borrowing and therefore interest obligation were much more than they could have been. This has changed with this budget. Government finance minister has promised that this practice will stop, and it has been stopped with effect from current. With effect from current fiscal year. As a result, you have seen that for current fiscal year, the fiscal deficit is slated to be 9.8% of GDP. It is not that all of a sudden Government of India has bumped up its expenses from less than 4% to 10% of GDP. It is true in the aftermath of COVID, government has been spending, has increased spending, but a lot of this spike in fiscal deficit comes from two regions. One is the transparency. Now the numbers are that most of 95% of government borrowings are reported as government borrowings, and therefore budget deficit, fiscal deficit goes up. The second reason, and that is also a very good thing about this year's budget, is that in the past, government has been owing a lot of funds, money, payments to SMEs, small sector, small entities from various businesses, small vendors, and also contractors. Government withheld those payments. But this year, government has discharged, has cleared a lot of those payments, and that also has added to high fiscal deficit for this year. And there's a hope generated by budgetary announcement that in future, government will be making the payments to its vendors. You see, the government is an important buyer of goods and services. And if government does not pay in time, that means that suppliers of goods and services to government, they do not have money or to do more business, or they have to borrow from banks to meet their working capital requirement. And that eats into their profit and their viability. So hopefully things will improve on this count as well. So these are the dimensions of government policies that are appreciable. Other thing that is appreciable in my view is the focus on growth at the expense of fiscal deficit. So the government during last several years has come across as conservative on fiscal front, but this year they have taken more liberal view of fiscal deficit. And this also, I think, is a good use of an opportunity created by COVID. In normal times, if government announced fiscal deficit of 10%, bankers, commentators, rating agencies will go after government. But today, nobody is criticizing, nobody can criticize government for pump priming economy, and even at the expense of substantial increase in fiscal deficit. And that's what government has done. It has increased, it has proposed capital expenditure up more than 5.5 lakh crore. That amounts to around 2.5% of GDP. It is a substantial range of 35%. It also, and as a consequence, the economy, it will play important role in making India fastest growing economy, as was pointed out by Dr. Sharma, that next fiscal year, India is going to be fastest growing economy. So enhanced capital expenditure spending will play important role in making India grow fast. Moreover, it's also appreciable that budget has focused on vaccination and health and wellness sectors in particular. Now here there are devils in details. If you look at the budgetary announcements, then budgetary announcement for health is to the tune of 2.84%. So on face of it, it looks an super impressive raise of 137%. But there is a catch here, and catch is that the finance minister has merged the health budget with schemes like drinking water schemes, on which government is proposing to spend more than 50,000 crores. So as a result, total budgetary allocation for health looks much more impressive than it is. If you look at, if you apply standard definition of health budget, then increase in budgetary allocation for health is modest. It's not 137% at all. Still, what is impressive, appreciable about budgetary allocation for health is 35,000 crore earmarked for vaccination. And so it's important to have a good sense of implications of this 35,000 crore. Traditionally, we argue that government spending has big multiplier. Within government spending, capital expenditure or expenditure on infrastructure has a big multiplier effect. But this expenditure of 35,000 crore will have multiplier effects, several times of multiplier effects generated by infrastructure spending. And the reason is that today several sectors, even today, they remain closed. Hospitality, travel and tourism. These sectors have not opened up even today. And these are employers. They employ millions of Indians. As a result, millions of jobs that have been lost due to COVID, we have not been able to retrieve them because people are still apprehensive going dining out, shopping, traveling. And unless people start demanding using these services, those jobs will not come back. On this count, vaccination is very crucial. As vaccination picks up, it will bring confidence back and people will start demanding these services. We should also notice that during last 1 year, there are a lot of pent-up savings. People who are lucky not to have lost their jobs, they have money, they have not been spending. And once the fear of disease disappears, then that demand will play out and will generate jobs. And vaccination is going to be the key. Actually, the speed of vaccination is going to determine at what rate we recover and how fast we recover from the COVID crisis. And so coming back to infrastructure, infrastructure allocation has been augmented for road, for railways, and for rural infrastructure. To give you a sense of implications, to give you a sense of what has been happening in recent years on infrastructure front, during last several years, you can see here I have two panels, and this one panel shows you the speed of highways construction in our country, and the left panel gives you a sense of the speed, the length of highways built in recent years. Now there has been impressive increase on both the counts, but during last 2 years, highway construction, road construction, infrastructure construction, they have suffered. And construction sector, infrastructure sector has directly, it employs, it is one of the biggest employer in our economy. Of course, nothing comparable to agriculture, but out of agriculture, it's a really important employer. What is more important is that infrastructure, road construction, railway construction, they have extensive and intensive backward and forward linkages. So real estate and construction sector, they benefit more than 200 other activities, other sectors in creating demand and employment. So it's important to bring this demand back, and the budget has done a decent job given the limits, fiscal limits of the government. So on this count also, I find budget has done a satisfactory job. But is it enough? My response is that it's not enough. We need to do more because we are up against a serious challenge. Our serious challenge, it comes on all the counts, and some of these challenges were mentioned by Professor Shakti. If you look at government spending, government has augmented its spending, has promised to augment spending for next fiscal year as well. But there are limits for government spending. Government does not have enough fiscal space even after amending the Fiscal Responsibility and Management Act. Then the second source of your demand is from exports. And in normal times also, we are not big exporters, and our export performance, if anything, it has become substantially worse. Actually, last 4 or 5 years, export performance has been highly disappointing. Then investment. So investment is missing. Investment is missing in during last 4 or 5 years. Actually, this is not the first time that private investment or appetite for investment is subdued. What is new? What is new to the crisis that has played out during last 2 years is that the consumption, private consumption, is also going to be subdued. The reason being that the private savings, as you can see from these plots, private savings have been consistently coming down. But private consumption, as is depicted by green plot here, has been going up till 2019. Now you can see that it is, on one hand, private consumption going up has kept our economy afloat. It kept the demand going, even though private investment was down, even though public investment was also not increasing substantially. But because of this increase in consumption, private consumption, the economy experienced demand, and as a result, productive activities kept on benefiting. But this led to mismatch. This led to a crisis in household balance sheet. Now on, households will not be able to borrow and spend. You see, when you spend more, when your consumption goes up, but your savings are not, it means that household sector has been borrowing. And during last several years, the private investors, developers were unwilling or unable to borrow and invest. But credit growth was reasonable, was not super impressive, but was reasonable. Why was it reasonable? Because banks have been lending to households. Now this will also stop. It must stop because household balance sheet has hit a crisis. Therefore, households should not be lent more by banking sector. But problem is that now demand will also come down. Therefore, we are up against a serious challenge. When household sector does not provide demand, cannot provide demand, then demand has to come from elsewhere. It has to come through private investment. But private investment is also, it's also optimistic to expect that private investment will pick up soon, because animal spirit is low even today, even after budgetary announcements. A student today asked a question about how come the capital market bounced. The capital market bounced after budget for very different reasons. One of the reasons is that there is a lot of pent-up savings. Banking sector has a lot of money, is not lending that money for investment. Investors, developers are also not chasing after banks that please lend me, I want to invest more. They don't want to invest more because they don't see future prospect of enhanced demand. Their present capacity utilization of private sector is around 70%. In such a situation, imagine what will you do if you are a developer, if you have money or access to money. You will not invest in new projects. So you use that money to invest in stock market. So it's that excess liquidity that is used to invest in stock market that explains why the stock market experienced what it did. And other important reason was that people who are investors, people who are investors in stock market, they were fearing an announcement. That an announcement they were fearing was not made by the finance minister. They were fearing that either the tax rates will go up or there will be some surcharge. That didn't happen, so they had money and they had reasons to feel jubilant about it, and the response was to invest in stock market and pushing stock prices through the roof. But investment itself is challenging. Even today, banks are reluctant to lend to investors, and the reason is, part of the reason is that there's an asset liability mismatch. I will explain this point briefly. But major reason why bankers are reluctant to lend is that bankers fear that if they lend for projects, and any project, every single project is risky. There is no 100% safe project. So even for genuine reason, a project can fail. That means that borrower can default for no fault of borrowers. In such a situation, bankers feel that investigative agencies may go after them. Their decisions could be second guessed and they could be harassed. This is one important reason that is deterring, discouraging lending for investment purposes. Lending for infrastructure purposes is hampered partly for this reason, but more serious reason is asset liability mismatch for commercial banks. And what is asset liability mismatch? Let me discuss it for the benefit of students here. That if you think of, let's say, Delhi airport, Mumbai airport, think of any big airport you have seen in India, or expressways you might have traveled on. Whenever you have stopped at a toll plaza, or next time when you stop at a toll plaza, read the name of toll plaza carefully. If the name ends like something like Gurgaon Jaipur Expressway Private Limited, if the name at toll plaza ends with Private Limited, it means that that road segment is developed by a private investor, by a private company. And now private company is charging user fee. That's why you are made to pay toll. Similarly, for Delhi airport, GMR Group has invested massive amounts and now it's recovering. But by the time investment from road can be recovered, by the time investment from an airport or railway track can be recovered, it takes several decades. Meaning thereby, the investors who want to invest in infrastructure, they need to borrow money for decades. But banks do not have money to lend for decades. So banks have money that they can hold on to for a few years. You and I make deposits in banks, for instance, and we make deposits only for a few years, never for more than 10 years, never for more than a decade. So that means that banks have money that they should be lending only for years, not for decades. But infrastructure investors need money that they can use, they can pay back after decades. And this is what is called asset liability mismatch for the banking sector. It shows that, and this is one important reason why banks find themselves unable to lend long, because lending for decades is very risky for them, and that also discourages them seriously, especially when bankers, CEOs are risk averse. And this is also lending to infrastructure by so far. The private investment in infrastructure has been borrowed from commercial banks in India. And as you can see, as I have just pointed out, that banks are not best suited to lend for infrastructure. On top of that, infrastructure projects suffer from delays, regulatory, environmental clearances, and this and that. As a result, the borrowers, investors in infrastructure, find themselves unable to service their loans, and those loans become non-performing assets, making things worse for the investor. Now, in this situation, in this backdrop, let's see what the budget has done. The government has opened three fronts to address, to attract private investment, to boost private investment in general, and in infrastructure in general, in particular. So one channel the government has opened is called monetization of public assets. So the government is very keen to monetize public assets. What does it mean? It means things like this. If an expressway or a national highway was funded by National Highways Authority of India by borrowing money from market or using taxpayers' money. So the road was built. Now it's ready for use. if government decides to sell that road segment to a private contractor, whereby government tells the contractor, you give me money now, but I give you right to charge toll user fee in lieu of your payment, and I give you this right for next 5 years, 10 years. This will be an example of monetization of road infrastructure. Similarly, airport, port infrastructure can also be monetized, can be rent out, so to speak. Then several public sector enterprises, Ministry of Railway, for example, is holding on to massive land parcels, tracts of land that lie unutilized. It is also, government is thinking of renting that, leasing those land parcels out. BSNL, for instance, MTNL, they have large parcels of land parcels in the heart of big cities, metros. So government is thinking of using this as an opportunity to lease out this land and raise resources. As if this happens, then private investment, private money will come and get invested in these assets. But the major focus of the government seems to be on privatization, divestment and privatization. In fact, it's, I think, after decades that any finance minister has used privatization in his or her budget speech. And in this budget, the finance minister was vocal about privatization. 2 banks and 1 general insurance company have been put on block for privatization. And then there's an idea to divest from LIC and others. So this is also, government is thinking that private investment will come through this, and government can use the money it will receive to meet its other social or other political objectives that it might have. And to facilitate private investment in general and infrastructure in general, it has announced Development Finance Initiative Institution, formally name given to DFI, is National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development. 20,000 crore have been allocated towards this end. Idea is that this money will be used to leverage, to attract private investment in infrastructure. And objective is that it can help circumvent the problem that is arising on account of asset liability mismatch of the commercial banks. Moreover, simultaneously, the budget aims to address issues of non-performing assets through a scheme called bad bank, popularly known as a bad bank. A bad bank would be a bank, an entity that will deal with, that will combine, that will take away non-performing assets from banks and will go after defaulters either through NCLT or through litigation, or basically it will be an entity that will specialize in recovering money or selling off or liquidating business entities that are not repaying the loan. So this also, if this works, then it will clean up the NPA, it will clean up the banking sector's books, and banks at least will find themselves in a position to lend. So that's the idea. However, for all these things to work, even if all these things work, it is not sufficient. The reason I say it's not sufficient is that we are not tapping an important source of money in the form of insurance companies and pension funds. Remember, I said investment in infrastructure is needed for decades. Banks do not have money to invest for decades. Even after bad bank and NPAs disappear, even if development finance institutions take up, they will still need money that is available for long term. And what are the important sources of long-term borrowing? Insurance sectors. For instance, when you and I buy insurance, when we buy medical insurance, life insurance, we keep on paying premium for years before we use, before we get paid back for illness or for at the end of the policy by the insurance company. Similarly, employees keep on contributing, employees and others keep on contributing to pension funds, pension schemes, pension companies, and they demand that money back after decades. So insurance companies and pension pension funds are important sources. They have the money that is available for decades, and so that money should be tapped. Only then we can hope to meet some of these challenges. In the absence of this, I have covered the points on this slide. In the absence of this, our recovery will not be robust. It will not be as robust as it can be. But some areas remain of long-term concern. In the past, we have not done enough on health sector, on education. So no country has become global economic, political, military power without fixing its problems of health sector and education. And here, generally, you will see constant refrain is that people blame government not investing enough. True. As a country, we have not been investing enough in health and education. But what is more unfortunate is the allocation that is made, the funds that are allocated, they are not being used effectively. Even more unfortunate is that we pay less attention to the human capital aspect of it. Let's say, how the quality of education of Indian youth, Indian children, it is function of how many schools, colleges, university you have. But it's more important is the quality of teachers and non-teaching and administrative staff. That will determine the quality of education and training that gets imparted. And we pay less attention to this crucial aspect. And we don't need government, actually. We don't need more money from government to be able to better health worker, to be able to responsible citizens to utilize these services effectively, or to be able to become responsive teacher, doctors. So this is our national problem, but government should not be blamed for this entirely. But as a consequence of underinvestment in health and education sector, what happens is that our growth trajectory is not its potential is not fully harnessed. As Professor Shakti pointed out, showed you through nice patterns that all along during last several decades, contribution of service sector has been much higher than contribution of manufacturing, both in terms of its share in GDP and also in terms of employment opportunities that are being generated. So in a sense, the Indian economy has not followed standard economic textbook that, an economy traditionally is dominated by agriculture sector, then by manufacturing, and then by service sector. That's the growth trajectory of most advanced economies today. But Indian economy has switched directly from agriculture to services sector. And in spite of best of efforts, there's no reversing of this trend. This means that we need to make sure that all the benefits from service sector can be harnessed in terms of employment. But to be able to do so, it is much more important for Indians to benefit from service sector. The quality of education and skilling is even more crucial for service sector. These days, due to digitization, many and more services are getting digitized. So far, we have been lucky to have large informal sector within services sector. But that informal entities, small entities, are under threat by digital technology. So to benefit from digital technology, we again need to, and also to address problems of unemployment, inequality, we need to invest in these two sectors. Let me stop here. I think I have already overshot my time by a few minutes though. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts. I request Harpreet to take up the questions from the attendees.
Good morning, sir. The first question is from Tushar Mittal, who asks, many economists are claiming that the budget does not adequately address concern over inequitable growth, which has been a worry across the globe due to the pandemic. Sir, can you please shed light on this issue?
Sure. What would you like me to do? To respond to each question? Or we take maybe 2-3 questions and then I respond to them. I will do whatever you suggest.
So as it is comfortable to you, I think so. as you
I'm
feel?
okay. I'm okay. So, but let me respond to the question on inequality. So, question is from Tushar. Uh, Tushar, I agree with you. Budget has not done enough to address the issue of inequality. But I should also point out that budget is not a primary instrument to address issue of inequality. It is not a short-run issue. It is something that can be addressed, should be addressed over medium-term horizon. It is true that budget could have taxed, let's say, Indian rich Indians more than they are being taxed at the moment. But there are trade-offs in economics. If you increase tax rates, it will have some benefit, but there will also be consequences. In my view, the major source of inequality is underinvestment in education, skilling, and health. You say, if you look in your neighborhood, whether you come from a city, a small town, or from a village, you would say that there were today the quality of education. If you have one person, one child getting quality education by a stroke of luck, that he or she got good teachers or was their parents were able to send them to good school, it puts the entire family on different income and wealth trajectory. Unlike ownership of land that used to be important in the past, today the quality of education, quality of human capital is far more important. And with dominance of service sector, it becomes even more crucial that service sector offers opportunity to students, to youth who come from disadvantaged background. But if their human capital is good, in the sense that they have good health and education, the service sector offers them opportunity of employment where income is remunerative enough to compensate. So that, I think, is the primary cause, and this cause can be addressed over medium term, long term horizon. One budget can't do much about it, but this budget was preoccupied by recovering growth in the aftermath of significant contraction. So
Thank you,
we can
sir.
go to next question.
Yes, sir. The next question says, will not job security be affected from this privatization project?
Yes, so here also, job security of individuals will be affected, certainly. Question we should also be asking is, what will happen to the job security at macroeconomic level? Will privatization generate more jobs or less jobs? I would say that privatization, a particular privatization, for example, privatization of bank, it will be misleading to argue that it will not create job insecurities. It will not make a job security front more uncertain. It will, uh, because uh, because the security that comes with public sector job, that security does not come in private sector. And once these banks get privatized, then they will go for what is called efficient allocations of factors of production. That in particular would mean they will choose profit maximizing mix of capital, technology, and the workforce. And in this exercise, it is very likely that the number of jobs in these banks will come down. But question, but we should not discuss, the argument can't stop here, because objective of the privatization is not to generate jobs in these two banks. Objective is to enhance competitiveness, vibrancy of banking sector, so that banking sector can make efficient decision, it can lend more. And therefore, the question we should be asking is whether it is good for economy in medium term or not. I believe that in a sector like banking sector, insurance sector, it should have at least 4 players, and it should have ideally 6 or 8 players, and it should have healthy mix of public sector entities and private sectors. Then it will bring a sense of discipline in both. The presence of private sector has advantage that through its cost cutting efforts, it puts some pressure on public sector entities also to perform better. So and on this count, I don't see anything bad about privatization of banks, because still we will be having several public sector banks in the banking sector. So everything considered, I am for it, even though it will undermine job security of employees in these two entities.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Soumya Shukla, who asks that is introducing accountability in the public sector a good option? Do we need a carrot and stick policy in this regard?
Yes, I think, best scenario, if you were to ask me, between privatization and improving public sector enterprises, functioning of public sector enterprises. I think improving functioning of public sector enterprises, if it can be achieved, will be much better than privatization, in my view. Our problem is, our national problem is that we are caught in a bind. Our public sector enterprises are grossly inefficient. They are, and it's hard to make them accountable. It's hard to make them efficient, because the problem is that the way we read job security in our country is that once we have job security, that means that you should work less. That has bearing on the services that are provided by public sector entities. You say, and that is the primary reason, one of the leading reasons why we see so much of contractualization of labor is that, so it is that it's very difficult to get government employees to work. And it is paradoxical that, neoclassical models have been invented in the West, but Indians behave like perfect economic agents. If we have job security, then we maximize utility by minimizing discomfort, by minimizing the efforts we put in. It does not make us feel that, okay, now I have job security, so let me work hard. Taxpayers are paying for my salary, so let me give them back. That reasoning somehow does not work, and as a result, one after the other, exceptions apart, one after the other public sector enterprises turn out to be loss-making, and they frustrate their services they provide is also frustrating, and that gives policymakers reasons to go for contractualization and in some cases privatization. But if we could work more responsibly, I think public sector enterprises, in theory at least, can deliver better outcome, can add more to social welfare than a private. Any private entities will bring in efficiency, but will also be in the business of cheating, exploiting consumers, misleading them, and it's hard to regulate. So both are challenging options. Let's see what happens. Yes, next question, please.
So, sir, the next question is from Mamta Ahuja. She asks, India has seen a sharper contraction in growth than several Western economies, where COVID-19 mortality is over 10 times higher. It is also sharper than all the other major developing countries. Western countries cushion the shock to their economies with aggressive income support stimulus. India's stimulus is minimal in comparison. The question whether the budget could have done more to bolster the economy through income support rather than enhanced outlays on infrastructure and capital investment.
You have alluded to, you actually have pointed out why India's economy has performed the way it has performed. So Indian lockdown was most severe, and economic activities were halted. They came to grinding halt, not because of disease per se, but because of the lockdowns announced by the center and also by the state government. Now, question is, was such a severe, extended, prolonged lockdown was justified? I would say yes, it was justified, especially if you look at things from policymakers, government's perspective. If you have to choose between lives and livelihoods, you would choose to save lives. When we were hit by COVID crisis, we were not prepared at all to deal with this crisis. We used to import ventilators. In such a situation, if you are a government, I think you have legitimate concerns that you want to delay spread of the disease. You want to prevent. Ideally, if you can, at bare minimum, you want to delay. You want to flatten the curve, so to speak. And that is what government did. And I think was most sensible thing to do. Because today, that gave government time to prepare for the crisis. And today we are self-reliant, self-sufficient in dealing with this crisis from all the way, so from mask to vaccination. And this would not have been possible without lockdowns, but lockdown inflicted the cost in terms of employment. And we also witnessed horrifying scenes where migrant workers were forced to go back to their native places by walking thousands of kilometers. Those were horrifying scenes. Those costs could have been mitigated, could have been avoided even with the prolonged lockdown. But I think government after that, so I think May, April, second half of April and May were unfortunate days, very unfortunate days for us, for kind of things that were witnessed. But since then, I think government has done, even in terms of a percentage of GDP, this fiscal support, the income support, food support, it comes down to less than 2% of GDP. But I think government was quick to deliver food, LPG, and other benefits to the poor, and also to augment MNREGA spending. You see, it's MNREGA spending at national level. It picked up in May, June, July, and that provide cushion. It's because of these measures that there have been two sectors that have been saving grace for Indian economy. One is the agriculture sector. So manufacturing, so dipped contraction, serious contraction. Services, of course, even much sharper, extensive contraction. So only two sectors that have been saving grace are agriculture, rural economy, and their MNREGA spending and direct transfer by the government, I think, played important role. We should appreciate that. Now, since then, should government have spent more? Maybe, yes, more spending would not have harmed. But then there's a trade-off. Should you spend more then and spend less now? Or should you spend more now? If government spends more now, then government can spend more in reviving jobs. And that is more important than transferring money at a level that was done by America and European countries. They could afford it, they did it, but I think, as I said, except second half of April and May, the government has done a good job in dealing with COVID crisis.
Thank you, sir. The next query asks, Professor, you are associated with different universities in the world. How do you think can we improve the quality of universities in India?
Okay, it's an important question, slightly, yes, not on the theme, but it's an important question, and I'm happy to share my views in 1 minute. It requires longest discussion, but my immediate response would be, based on what I have seen of students in Europe, in American universities. I have taught in Europe and in US. I taught at JNU, at Delhi School of Economics. I don't think our students are less smart. And occasionally I go to colleges, not only Delhi University, but I go to colleges in rural India, different parts of the country. And one thing comes out consistently, that our students are no less smart than American students. American universities attract students from across the globe. So the admission is very competitive. Still, I feel that in a decent college, university in India, students have potential. Their intellect, their innate abilities are comparable. But the quality of education they get is not comparable at all. And there, I feel several factors are to be blamed. First of all, I think teachers are to be blamed, teachers, doctors. And there, I think I see that there's a tendency among government-funded schools, colleges, and universities, teachers in these places, they misuse job security. I think we can be much more honest, sincere in discharging our responsibility. But that's not the entire problem. That's not the only problem with our administrative structure within colleges, within schools, within universities also hampers creativity. It is not conducive for teachers to excel in teaching and research and imparting quality education. Uh, I think these are the main reasons. And of course, we need more money to do research, to attract. Our challenge is that, and allow me half a minute more here. Unemployment problem, the way we look at unemployment problem is that it results in poverty, it results in this and that, in crimes. But what happens is that it prevents possibility of self-selection. People who come to teaching should be people who are motivated, who want to teach. People who come to government jobs are people who should be, guided by altruistic considerations, because private sector gives ample opportunity to earn as much money as you want to. At the top level, their salaries are several times more than what we earn in government sector. So ideally, one would expect that if we could reduce unemployment, then it will allow people who are motivated, those people will come and join teaching and health services. Today, that's not is happening because of massive unemployment. We are looking for not teaching job or health sector job. We are looking for any job. And it also plays out if you look at data, if you look at employment data, so our unemployment rate in the age group up to 29 or 30 years is very high. Then unemployment rate sharply comes down if you look at age group 30 onwards. What happens? What explains this sharp drop in unemployment rate across, if you on horizontal axis you have age? It is because our youth are busy preparing for civil services, competitive government services. And once they hit the age limit, there are very few jobs. There are millions of competitors. And once they lose the prospect, then they want to grab any job. But it is a manifestation of the underlying unemployment problem. If we can make some headway, then I think our health and education services will also improve. Students can also do better. Especially in these times, in classroom, teachers can see whether you are paying attention, you are being alert or not. But online teaching, you have to be students. You have to be very alert, self-motivated to make best use of the online teaching. So I think we all can do better. Yeah, that's all. That's all. But maybe we can have another talk on this topic.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Vivek Rajak. He asks, do you think that the government of India has actually mismanaged the economy in the last couple of years by being super active, but actually the real economic variables such as gross domestic capital formation, exports, even consumption expenditure and employment has been declining pre-COVID period?
Okay, so as a matter of fact, economic indicators have been declining. Employment, be it GDP growth rate, be it capital formation. You are absolutely right. They all have been seeing downward trend. Now, is this all doing of the government? Some of it is doing of the government, and here I agree with Professor Shakti Kumar that it's a mixed. I would say that demonetization was an unwelcome decision, but GST also caused major disruption, and GST was not a bad decision. You say in economics there are trade-offs. We teach you first best scenario, competitive equilibrium, Pareto optimality. You look at those as their ideal reference points. We should be moving in that direction, but don't think we can get there in real world. If we talk about GST, for instance, if you delayed implementation of GST, then we had problems. We had serious problems. We had chungis at every entry point in every municipality, even in small towns. We had host of taxes that was hampering flow of traffic, freight traffic, that was leading to inefficiency. So that was one second best scenario. In this situation, you introduce GST without much preparation. That caused major disruption. And those disruptions, the associated cost could have been reduced by delaying, postponing GST implementation a little bit, but it's hard to tell which one would have been better alternative. So from medium-term perspective, introduction of GST is very good. Your students have already studied this, or you will be taught that GST, it reduces distortions at production level. It also helps in spreading tax bracket, tax net, so that more Indians pay tax more truthfully. It's not a perfect mechanism, but it is better than what it was there. But it's a short-term cost have been massive, and I think those costs were worth paying. Similarly, implementation of IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Again, people blame that many thousands of companies have been lined up. Now bankers are suing companies, and so IBC and NPAs are being blamed for that. But this is also something that will make us pay cost in short run, but will pay us long. Our economic system, so to speak, our economic body, its blood had got contaminated, and some cleansing was needed, and it's being done through GST and IBC. Those now, I think any government, including this government, could have reduced some of the associated cost. One way where I think government can make economic activities, can promote economic activity is by assuring officials and bankers that if you make a good faith decision and your decisions turn out to be wrong, then you will not be harassed. I think this is something that is very important. In my view, it's as important as a vaccination. So it can help bring confidence and decision making among bankers. They will be encouraged to lend, to take good faith risky decisions, to lend, promoting investment and employment in the process. Yes, so this is how I will. But this particular budget, I think overall, it is a good budget. So even if government had postponed, dithered, or made mistakes, so at the moment with this budget, I think I'm happy with the economic direction that we are moving in. That's all.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ashish Maurya, who asks, since the financial year 2014-15, the fiscal deficit has been coming down from 4.2 to 3.0 in 2019-20. For the first time, this government has a very strong view for increasing the fiscal deficit up to 6 to 9% for the next 5 years. Due to a lot of tension and barriers with Iran and Venezuela, a huge impact has been arise in the imports of crude oil. With the current tension of oil imports, does it seem possible or seems practical to have a higher deficit estimate, or will it finance the balance?
Mr. Maurya, you see, I addressed this issue, at least half of your question, I addressed in my presentation. So even though the budget numbers were showing declining trend or stationary trend in fiscal deficit, but actually true fiscal deficit on the balance sheet, budget balance sheet, and off the balance sheet, together the total fiscal deficit has been going up. This year's fiscal deficit is actually is high because of the transparency that has been introduced by this year's budget. So it's not that in the past fiscal deficit was decreasing and it has gone up now. No, that's not true. It has been going up consistently for last, I would say, 10 years or so. Now, as to the other part of your question, whether this fiscal deficit is sustainable, can be maintained in view of what can happen at the oil front. Oil prices are going up, but I have reasons to be hopeful that we don't have to be alarmed. We don't have to be alarmed by what is happening, what can happen. The reason is that we have good understanding. We have fortunately developed good understanding with the government of Saudi Arabia. And now, during last 1.5 months, our relationship with Iran are also, we are trying to retrieve our good relations with Iran. So, and with the change in government in the US, so we can hope if government pushes, government can negotiate a deal with Americans to allow us oil imports from Iran. And that should take care of our concerns. So other source of comfort is that in the past China has been China has been an engine that needed a lot of coal, lot of oil, but in future I don't see any economy including China having this massive huge appetite for commodities. So as a result, commodity prices including oil prices are likely to go up, but we don't have to be alarmed. We have enough foreign reserves. Foreign exchange reserve is massive, and on that count, I am not alarmed at all. Thank you for asking this question, though.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Dr. Bharat Singh. He asks, is the pattern of growth witnessed in case of Indian economy where service sector has preceded the manufacturing sustainable in the long run, or a trend reversal is required?
So what is clear is that we need to boost manufacturing. There's no doubt about that. If we could keep our service sector informal substantially, then it was possible, in theory, it was possible to employ Indians, shift our workforce from agriculture to service sector. But service sector is posing its own challenges. More and more services. You look at transportation services, you look at retail services, you look at hospitality services. They are all shifting from small entities to big companies, because big companies are making use of technology, tech platforms like Amazon, Ola, and Uber. They all, if you look at the benefit, they have benefited consumers, but they have benefited consumers at the expense of employment and small micro enterprises. So as a result, millions of jobs are at stake. The point I want to make is that because of digitization, the service sector will benefit those Indians, those Indian youth who are skilled. Unskilled are going to get worse deal than they have been getting in this. And as such, with the digitization is like, you making your manufacturing capital intensive. So that with the digitization, number of workers required, the proportion will come down. And that means that service sector in itself cannot, in the direction it's moving, it cannot take care of our unemployment concerns. So we need to boost manufacturing. That's what is urgently needed. We also need to invest, also encourage our exports, and that will require investment in infrastructure, logistics, cold storage chains, our ports and airports capacities. So yes, the jobs have to come through development projects and manufacturing. That is very important.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. The next question is for Shakti, sir. What will be the price trends in gold in upcoming time, and what will be its effect on the Indian economy?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Is this question for me?
Yes, sir. It's for you.
Tell me.
What will be the price trends in gold in upcoming time, and what will be its effect on the Indian economy?
Oh. I think its price will move up. So as Professor Ram Singh has also said that the investment of money is moving toward the stock market. So I think that will be, if the proper environment will not be created in the other sector or manufacturing or services, then the money will move for investment in the stock market and gold.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I hand over the mic to Ritu.
Thank you so much, Harpreet. Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much, Professor Shakti Kumar, Professor Ram Singh, and Dr. S.P. Sharma for giving so much valuable knowledge and sharing your thoughts with us. Now, Dr. Ishmita Singh will sum up and propose a vote of thanks.
A very good afternoon to all. I, Dr. Ishmita Singh, is obliged to give a word of thanks on behalf of the Economic Society, Kirt. I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Professor Shakti Kumar, and Professor Ram Singh for bringing their expertise and experience around the table and engaging in such fruitful, constructive, and open exchanges today. When planning an event such as this, it is imperative to gain the participation of experts in the field. Your willingness to share your time and expertise in the area was critical to the success of this event. We were fortunate to have speakers who have enhanced our knowledge with their different aspects on the slowdown of the Indian economy and the future ahead. Our first panelist, Dr. S.P. Sharma, gave an enlightening speech where he highlighted on the fact that Indian economy is observing a V-shaped recovery due to the plethora of reforms introduced by the government and it will sustain. He also said that, he gave us some of his suggestions that, it is, which will help us in enhancing or uplifting the Indian economic growth, such as, he said that the government's names that are announced, they need to be integrated at the central level and the state level. He also talked about improving on the ease of doing business, and he also talked about the fact that the local manufacturers need to not only grow locally, but they also have to be competitive at the international level. Hence, we would like to go with that positive hope that in the next financial year, which was predicted, that India will have a double-digit growth. We now go to our second panelist, Professor Shakti Kumar, who have enriched our knowledge by dissecting the slowdown of the Indian economy into 4 steps. So he very well iterated that, that first thing, that is Indian economy, the slowdown in the Indian economy deliberated, maybe due to the reforms, that were not implemented well by the government. Is it self-inflicted due to the low agricultural productivity and hence leading to massive unemployment as the manufacturing sector is not able to absorb them? Also, as India is not able to move towards an export-oriented economy. Thirdly, he's also put it on the fact that, is it cyclical due to the high non-performing assets? And lastly, is it structural due to the high tariff disinvestment and the mismatch of educational degree and skills? If we look at his speech, he also, tried to explain us the sectoral aspect, that how the slowdown in the agriculture sector could be one of the reasons behind the slowdown of the Indian economy. Hence, as rightly said by Professor Shakti Kumar, that all this together could be the reasons for the slowdown of the Indian economy. And if we work into the main 2 points which were highlighted by you, sir, that in the one of the barrier is the ease of doing business, which was also said by Dr. Sharma as well, and the investment in agriculture, developing infrastructure could be the way to escape from it. From here on, we had our third panelist, Professor Ram Singh. He gave a very stimulating speech and elevated today's discussion by posing a very, in a way, a question that to us is that, has India done enough to uplift the growth? So he further also emphasized on the fact that, India has proposed number of reforms, but still there is need to be done to be done more, especially in infrastructure and the health sector. The decline in private private and government savings, decline in private investment. They are really, really very critical factors which are leading to the slowdown of the Indian economic growth. The budget that, as explained by Sir, that the budget recently emphasized on monetization of public assets, privatization, direct private investment, but this, as rightly said by him, this all is insufficient if you're not capping the money in the form of insurance, as there is limit of increase in FDI in the insurance sector. Another very, very important aspect that was mentioned is that government needs to work on human capital with the emphasis on the health and education sector, as our growth trajectory is not fully harnessed due to lack of investment in it. The two core problems of today, inequality and unemployment, they should be taken in high priority. If we look at Sir's speech, so very well think that he said that the four things are interrelated. Because if you are not investing in health and education, then probably we are leading to the problems of inequality and unemployment. So I think today's, in the end, I can only take the leverage to say that, we could find the answers to the question that we were grappling with. That is Indian economy slowdown a self-inflicted process? And this also gives fruits of thought to all our young scholars for future research. Thank you so much. And a very big thank you to all our panelists for doing that. I also thank the audience for being wonderful listeners. Finally, I would express my gratitude to Professor Gurmahinder Singh, Principal of the College, Dr. Meena Singh, Convener of the Economics Department, Dr. Ghanshyam Bairwa, Senior Faculty Member of the Economics Department, my colleague, Dr. Sarika Khurana, and students of Kirt Economic Society. Without them, this event was not possible. Now, I just would want to request all of you in the end to please switch on your cameras for a group photograph. Can we all just switch it off?
Harpreet, you are taking a click?
Yes, ma'am, I'll take the click.
Okay.
I request everyone to kindly switch on their cameras.
Is it done, Harpreet?
Yes, ma'am, it's done.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you all.
Have a good day.
I request all the participants not to leave right now. We are sharing the feedback from attendance form. Please fill that and then please leave the meeting.
Feedback form has been shared in the chat box. Before leaving, kindly fill the form as it is mandatory for the selectors. Thank you.
The feedback form, feedback come attendance form has been, a link has been shared in the chat box. I request all the participants to please fill it. It's mandatory for issuing you the certificate.